this talk is about intelligence without risk. So we've been through many different sessions. We started from the opening speak, cohesive organizations, and this is very much aligned with making sure that as an organization that you work for, we can have that cohesiveness to bring the intelligence, but not as we know the intelligence today, like AI with risk and hallucination and unpredictable results. We want to see how we can actually leverage that technology and make it risk-free. So let's see what does that risk-free mean to us, right? So I try to give you some practical techniques that you can also apply day to day as a business analyst or project management roles that you have. And there are some new terminologies and new wording and new glossary of the terms that we need to get our head around it, and I'll go through that as well. So hopefully it's not as boring as I think it is. Excellent. And this is the last session before closing speakers. So, because I want to make sure no one is sleeping, we start with a question. So, almost everyone is agreeing that business decisions are important, all of that, but what do you think the percentage relation between the organization's outcome and business relation is? So, people that thinking the bracket number one, 0 to 25%, who thinks 0 to 25? Going higher? Second bracket, 26 to 50%. Relation between decisions and outcome, 1, okay? Bracket 3, 51 to 75. Really? Okay, that's interesting. So bracket 4, 76 to 94. 76 to 94. Sold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 95 to 100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, those are on the minus bracket. We don't have minus. So what do you think? So this is actually very interesting because when we talk about organizations' outcome, they vary between the industry, between the organizations, between their goal, their vision and mission, non-profit versus profitable, etc. Right? But at the end of the day, even if for non-profit organizations, customer experience matters, P&L, growing revenue, although they are non-profit, but they need to make money to serve other clients and community for free. Risk mitigation, compliance is important, one of the outcomes. And time to delivery, you can look at the time to delivery from the operational efficiency, right? So generally, if you are in any organizations, the outcome is around these kind of categories. There might be something outside of it, but not necessarily. Okay, here is the reality. So the last bracket is the answer, 95%. So 95% correlation between organizations' outcome and the decisions they make and execute. It's not about the process, not about the system, data, AI, human, whatever. Only the decisions they make and execute has 95% direct correlation with the business outcome that we mentioned, right? So ultimately, companies' value is some of the business decisions they make and execute. Now, having this in mind, I want to tell you a story. So this is a story, this is from Rumi, the greatest poem in the humankind. So that's really about the elephant in the dark. Who knows the elephant in the dark? One? Okay, so it's not going to be boring for the rest of us. So the story is, if we have a dark room and we send an elephant there and no one knows there's an elephant in the room, and then we send people in the room and we want those people identify the creature by touching different parts of the elephant. And we want them to tell us what would they think this creature is. So someone touches the tail, says it's a snake. Someone touches the leg, says, well, it's a killer, or the ears may be a giant butterfly. The point here is everyone explaining based on their own experience. Because you don't see it, you just explain what you experience, and that's your understanding from the problem, right? This elephant is exactly what organization is facing when they want to define and work on the outcome. No one step back and says, okay, we want to improve the outcome. What do? They look at the outcome from their own angle and their experience. Hence, we have data governance, we have AI governance. Everyone governs something, no one governs outcome. So data governance, they care about the data democratization and data pipeline and data quality and everything about the data, dashboard and reports and Power BI. We know how it goes. And AI, we have AI governance, making sure it is accurate, it's not biased, everyone can adapt it, and so on and so forth. But the world that you guys live in the business operation as a business analyst, you see it and you feel it firsthand. The outcomes are lagging. Unintended consequences, conflicting actions, inconsistent results, hence bad customer experience, loss of profit and market share, probably, and most often that's the case when we measure the organizations as how they grow, right? So those data governance and AI governance did not help. Even we have process governance. Process is very much in the foundation of every organization, and they have like team of Six Sigma and process governance. Still didn't help, and outcomes are lacking based on what we see. Because no one governs outcome, but it's not because we don't want to govern outcome, it's literally impossible to govern outcome, because by nature, outcomes are very dynamic, and there are so many different factors that influences outcome that is out of our control. And at any point in time, it's been pulled and pushed to different directions. So it's not in our control, so we can't govern it. But by a very good approximation, 95% of the outcome has a direct correlation with the business decisions they make and execute. So 95% of the time, if we govern business decisions, we can control and align outcome. And that's the discussion we want to have. How we can control and align outcomes by governing business decisions. Do I make sense? Speaking of outcomes, one of the very common outcomes that almost every organization wants is improving customer experience, CX. I pick CX just as an example, but you can apply the same principle, same problem on any outcome that you want in your organization. Now, this is a recent stat report from Forrester. 21% of the brands see a decline in customer experience. This is for last year, with having all the data in our hand, the agentic AI and LLM and Gen AI and you name it AI. Still, 21% decline, and this is not only for the last year, this is the second year in the row. So it's not by accident, it's shocking, it's a systematic issue that we have. And interestingly, 73%, they didn't move a needle. So if you look at the CX, I need to double down here a little bit to explain what the CX is for the people that they're not so much familiar with the concept. So CX is two sides of the same coin. One is the quality of the product services we provide, how we solve the problems of the customer, and how much they're happy after we solved it. So if we increase the quality, we hope the customer loyalty goes up. So retention, they stay with us. Enrichment, meaning that they buy more product and services of us. And advocacy, word of mouth, they refer us to new clients and grow happens, right? So that's really what is called is the Forrester framework for measuring the CX from different angles, and it's called CX index, and that's how those stats are measured. Now, who has worked in the CX as a DA or project manager here? Who knows CX a bit? Okay. So there are two ways that traditionally and even today, like most of the organizations look at improving CX, customer experience. And the CX is just an example again from the outcome we want to improve, right? I want to have a point that we say, okay, if we don't do that, what do we do and how is it impacting CX? So that's where we are heading. Now, the way the CX works is we have two approaches that need to work side by side together. One is process first. So everyone, if you go to any organization, ask them, okay, what do you think a process is? You ask from CEO to CIO to CTO to the man on the floor that is doing their own thing. They're going to tell you different things what a process is, but the core principle and understanding of the process is generally the same. They know what the process is and they can deal with it. Now, that's why one of the very prominent approach in solving any problem in organizations is process first. Similarly, this is the same applicable for the customer journey mapping. So that means they look at the processes, they map the customer across different channels like email, mobile, branch, whatever that channel means to that particular business, and then they look at the touch point that the customer has some form and shape of engagement with that brand. That's called the touch point. Now, that is what the customer journey is. So you go to branch, you call your agent, you send an email, all of these are touch points. And by the way, any customer are at different stage from awareness to purchase to support to whatever that life cycle of the customer is. So that's the definition of the customer journey and customer journey map, essentially, in a nutshell. So we create a map of customer across different channels for different stages that they have, and we identify the touch point. We want to improve the engagement of the customer at those touch points. Logical, right? Now, the way they improve the engagement of the customer at those touch points is using the data and analytics to predict. We build predictive model, we use AI data, whatever, to predict what is the likelihood of the customer accepting this specific proposition we send them at that touch point, like sending offer in the email, on the agent they offer you something, right? So that's really what it is. The problem is we are using the data and analytics and the process first approach like steering the ship and looking at where it was 50 minutes ago, not where it is heading right now. It's a predictive model. Based on the history, we determine what should be good or what is relevant for this specific customer. Now, if you look at how it's done in parallel to the process first approach, this is called the data-driven approach. Data-driven mindset, any organization is like, we are data-driven, we want to make better business decisions and all of that. We're going to talk about that and we can see very soon where the problem is, right? So, the data-driven approach, who is familiar with the action framework? This is coming from the data and analytics department generally, action framework, very famous process that we've been implementing and deploying this process for decades, right? So organizations acquire data, they collect data, they organize it to create information, they process it and analyze it to create insight, with the hope that these insights, dashboard, Power BI, reports, etc., remember we do deal with all of that, somehow magically transform to action that creates the outcome that we want, which is aligned with business objectives. That's what it is. Now, the problem with that is, let's see. You talk to any CIO or chief data officer or whoever the owner of that function is, they all agree they have the best clean data, the best algorithm with quite good accuracy. Still, when they hand it over to business, 77% of the time, business says it's not related to the decisions they want to make, right? All the data artifact they create, 77% of the time, it's irrelevant. So it's not about the data accuracy. Here is another interesting report. 78% of the time, people use that fabulous artifact of the data to justify the decisions they've already made. We human, we suck in decision making. We suffer from confirmation bias, and that's what it is. We don't use the data to improve decisions, we use it to justify the decisions we've already made. Isn't that interesting that when thinking about the data quality and accuracy of algorithms, it's not going to fit in any of this story. I'll show you more. So we actually double down in this data-driven approach, and we use the LLM and new AI and all of this wonderful stuff. 40% of the time it helped with creative tasks, fine. 23% of the time, 1 in 6 answers are wrong in problem-solving tasks. This is shocking. If 1 in 6 answer was wrong, I was fired from the company I'm working for. It's look at it this way. Every time that you answer, 1 in 6 is wrong. Here is interesting. Someone says, okay, now that's like new LLM stuff, AI. This is interesting. AI ML models. This is for traditional machine learning models. 80% of the time, they deliver 0 business value to organizations. Literally 0. Despite the fact that the model is very accurate and data is valid and data is clean, 0 business value, right? I think you get the gist of it. So we are failing systematically. So most of the AI Gen or Gen AI, 95%, they have 0 measurable impact in revenue. One of the outcomes was revenue, right? Hence, we're talking about the accelerating of the efficiency and operational efficiency and all of that. Not really. So this is not just some stats, random reports. It shows us early signs of systematic failure of how they help us to make decisions. And hence 95% of the time, those decisions are correlated with the outcomes we want to improve. Now, the gap is really clear. So Gartner identifies the gap in the actual entity asset of the decision itself that we don't govern. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. What does that look like? Also, Bain and Company reports show 95% are correlated with the business decisions that we make and execute. So the gap is obvious. The gap is decision. But how do we go about it? I mean, okay, so decisions, now what? We need a methodology to help us to go and solve the problem from the decision point of view. Everything that we do is from the data angle, from algorithm angle, from process angle, system. you don't see much of the problem solvers that they look at the decision idea, and that's what this methodology is about. It's called decision-centric approach. So the decision is at the center, and everything else, data, process, system, human, everything else, serves to make sure that decision has the quality. And as a result, organizations can make optimized, customer-centric, situation-aware business decisions by operationalizing decision governance. Now, that's the promise. Okay. Now, decision-centric approach wants to make decisions the first-class citizens of organizations, meaning in organizations, we govern and manage many different assets. Physical assets, computer, chair, I don't know. People, well, we are more than assets, that's what we are really hoping for. But we've been managed with HR as an asset anyway. That's the reality. Computer, warehouses, anything. So we want to make sure processes, data, there are assets, but no one really treats decision as an asset. And decision-centric approach wants to give you a way to make sure that you can treat decision as the most significant asset in organizations. Why? Because 95% of the time, that's what it influences the outcome that you're looking for. Okay. Now, at this point, however we go about solving a problem, decisions are implicit and hidden. They are implicit as part of the process, data, AI, algorithm. And they are hidden. If you can't look at it and you can't point to it, you can't govern it. So the first step is making sure we can explicitly model business decisions so they become visible. When they become visible, you can govern them, you can improve them, you can manage them, and all the wonderful stuff will happen based on this explicitly modeling business decisions. Now, in order for decision governance to work across organizations, it has to work in these 4 dimensions: the decision itself, the decision model, the decision cycle, and the decision continuum. This is where those terminologies I mentioned that we need to go through. I'll go quickly so we get to a very practical section of the session so you can see really decision modeling, how does it look like. Now, when I refer also decision here, that's equivalent to business decision. So a decision is a commitment to a course of action. So that means you have to have an action after that. If it sits in the dashboard, it's not really a decision, it's an insight, no matter it's a predictive insight or prescriptive insight, whatever it is, right? And that influences a judgment regarding a subject. So you want to take a loan, you're a subject, they need to do the credit check on you to shape their understanding and judge you whether you're eligible for that specific loan. So that's what the business decision is. Are you eligible for that amount of loan? That's a business decision. It's based on data, insight, rules, computation. Now, there is a concept of decision model. It's a way that we represent that decision, the judgment, the computation, in a shape and form that is understandable among all stakeholders. That includes the AI, your senior executive, the data scientist and developer and business analyst. We need to have a common language, we need to establish a common language to represent the business decision that everyone looks at it and say, yes, that's what the decision is about and how we go about it in organization, as an organization, right? So it makes the decisions clear, transparent, communication easy, everyone's on the same page. So decision cycle is an iterative loop that you look at the data, you connect to the data, you make sense of the data, you execute that decision model we talked about, it creates an outcome, based on that outcome, you take some actions. Here is the important thing. This decision cycle is called OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. In many of the solutions that been provided with many of the vendors, the act is eliminated. And here is a hard fact. If you don't act on the decision, it's just an insight. With just an insight, you don't change organization behavior. Act is very critical, and that's how you close the entire loop. So you connect to data, you make understanding, you execute decision model, it creates an outcome, and you take an action based on those outcomes. And last one. So those decisions are not in isolation. So if you go and you want to buy a loan, I give you one example. You might go to the website, you call an agent, you check your email, you go to the website again, a pop-up comes and it says, new credit card with discounted rate. Guess what? If you get that credit card, you cannot get that loan. It's not serving you. And that organization, the loan provider, the lender, is not set up to really annoy you. Every department, they do their own job marketing. Since you offer your own agent, they do their own thing, and everyone ticks every single box. They actually meet their criteria. Everyone is doing a good decision for their own department. All the metrics are green. Your experience, you don't experience single decision, you experience the whole organization with the collective of the outcome they produce toward you. Meaning that decisions influence the other decisions, and the experience you have is not with one decision, it's with the organization that you're in touch with. That's why it's important we look, the decision governance take care of the continuum of decisions. So if we are in touch to get a loan, don't send me the decision that is about getting a credit card. This is like a very simple example, but you can put it in your own context, see how that works. So the idea is a decision influences another decision, downstream systems and outcomes will change with executing of one decision. And also the decision as it goes on, decision that is correct and accurate today, it might not be, and it actually definitely will not be correct and accurate for maybe a month or 2 months later, because you change your mind, you don't want it again loan, right? Because regulation changes, there is a new thing coming to your regulation, you're not even eligible. Because the loan provider wants to go for another segment and you're not part of that initiative anymore, right? So things shift and change. So the decisions that producing the outcome today may not necessarily be the right decision, or the outcome of that decision may not be valid in a month or 2 time. And that is what it's called the disconnected decision experience. So we need to make sure over time we can improve those decisions, whatever that means. Sorry. Here is now a practical technique you can apply. So we talked about decision modeling, decision cycle, and decision continuum. Now, the way decision-centric approach works is to explicitly model business decision, right? And that's how the decision modeling works. So who is familiar here with decision modeling, any kind of decision modeling for that matter? Okay, then that's a good session you are in. There are very different versions of the technique for decision modeling. So if you want to look at it, some people even may use like process modeling, BPM and stuff for modeling a business decision. That's the wrong way, because you actually lose all the relationship that decision has. Decision by nature, as we discussed till now, is a very different entity. It has different ownership. It has a very far-reaching impact. It has a different time life cycle. It has a different influences. It's a different thing. So you can't just go and model it with whatever we are doing right now. There is a very specific notation language which is called DMN, Decision Model and Notation, which is built to model business decisions. Now, if you look at the picture, that graphical representation is a business decision. But what is interesting about this specific model is it brings all different decision logic as a holistic view for your business decision. So in your business decision, you might use AI and LLM. You might need business rules and policies. You will need data from some other data sources, whatever it is. You probably will have computation, statistical computation that you need to involve in that decision making. So when you model the business decisions explicitly, you bring all of these techniques under one umbrella, a very cohesive decision model that actually brings all of that for execution. So decision model annotation is not just a visual graphical representation of what the decision is. If you put enough details around the decision, it becomes executable, meaning that you can just drop that into a process, it executes and returns the outcome for you, the result. If you put it inside your application, inside other scenarios, you can execute it and it can create that result for you. Now, because it is explicit, that means even if you put it inside your agentic system, it is a deterministic execution. So every single time you execute it, it gives you, with the same input and context, will give you the exact same result. It's not like every time you ask ChatGPT, it tells you something else that is literally contradicting the previous answer. That is the deterministic execution. Now, let's learn decision modeling. So, this diagram that you see on the screen is called decision requirements diagram. Essentially, when you want to document the requirements about a decision, that's how you should go about it. So you build a model that represents requirements of a decision. So if you look at the corner, I have a guide there. If it is not visible, we will share this deck also, you can have a look at it. So any decision requires some input. You can see in the image, we have a customer detail as input and call agent input. This is by the way, this decisions requirement diagram, or in short DRD, is about the contact center. When you call a contact center, you want to cancel your account with them, their fund management of your money. You say, I'm done, I want to go to some other financial services with my money. That's what is going to happen. So the agent should make sure that you stay with the organization, right? But here's an interesting part. He cannot just talk you into it. It is a regulated environment. So there are certain things they can say and certain things they can do and certain things you can do that benefits both you and the organizations. Therefore, you need that decisions requirement diagram to dictate what is possible for that conversation. And that's what you can see determine possible conversations. Now, depends on different criteria and different conversations and different path into that negotiation, there are certain things that might or might not be applicable to you. So all of these blue rectangles represent a decision unit, which as a whole is that decisions requirement diagram. The pink round rectangle, you can see, represents the input. You have two data inputs in this particular example. And the cross-cut green one there, well, if there are multiple options available for you, which one yield to the better outcome for you and the organizations? Let's say you have 5 paths to go. Which one is better for you? Which one is better for organizations? So we need to optimize that for the agent on the call. And that's where the AI-powered arbitration comes in play. So that green box, crosscut green box, in this example is the arbitration algorithm from AI, but it can be any business knowledge, right? So that represents the business knowledge. Now, so that's how you actually start modeling requirements for a decision. Now, you have a couple of stakeholders along your team. You can explain that without throwing 200 pages of the requirement specification at them. It's very clear. So everyone knows how we can determine what conversation we want to have in this specific context with a client. That explains it. We can have this set of conversation based on circumstances, right? So one of the benefits of the decisions requirement diagram is clarity. So everyone is clear. Now, if you look at the diagram as well, the way it works is, who is familiar here with the concept of decomposition? Right. So you model a decision based on the decomposition technique. That means you have a very complex concept, you start decomposing it to smaller components that they create as a whole that big, large concept that you have. So at the top of the screen you can see determine next best conversation. And then the two nodes that connected to that is possible conversation and arbitration node. That means in order to have the best conversation, we have to have the possible conversations, all of it, and then we run the arbitration to find the best one. Now, if you look at the next level, possible conversation has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another 5. So you start decomposing until you're satisfied. It's not worth anymore. That's enough. So decomposition technique from top to bottom, it's dependencies. That depends on this 2, this depends on this 4 depends on the rest, right? Here is an interesting point. If you look at the decisions requirement diagram from bottom to top, it's a decision flow. That means the outcome of these bottom ones becomes the input to the next decision. The outcome of the second row from bottom becomes the input for the next decision, possible conversation. So top to bottom, decomposition, bottom to top, decision flow. Next one, right. Any decisions, almost all of the decisions, require some input. Now, those pink rectangles represent the input. This is where the data modeling and semantic modeling comes in play. This is a placeholder for the input we need for this specific decision. Okay, I say it again, I want to ask a question. This is a placeholder for the data we need for this decision. If we go back to the conversation we had for building machine learning, just boiling the ocean, the biggest problem of organizations and the whole data science team is they don't know what they don't know. Therefore, they have to go and boil the ocean. All the data should be valid and clean. For what decision? What's the purpose of it? Where is it used? What operation? All of them will go away because we know exactly what data we want. Guess what? We may not be able to have, or we may not have collected that data. Fine. Fail fast, move on, find another decision you can improve. It's better to spend 2 years and clean the data and you're like, okay, that is not what we wanted to improve this specific decision. So this gives them a guideline, the blueprint of how they can actually collect the data they need to improve this decision. And 80% of the AI ML project fail with delivering no business value. Guess what? It doesn't fail this time because if we do the machine learning, for example, in one of those boxes, it actually improves the business operation because this is in the contact center up front. We know what operation we are improving. So you're not facing that type 3 error of the data scientist, meaning solving a wrong problem. So that is where the semantic and data contract comes in play. So we specify what are the structures we need for this specific decision we want to model. Remember, decisions requirement diagram. Now we're talking about the data requirement of that decision. Now, more often than not, in regulated industries or any industry for that matter, there are business rules, right? If you guys are familiar probably with business rules, if you're not, Ronald Ross at the end of this BBC conference, have a talk with Ronald Ross. The father of business rules is here, it's a privilege. Now, business rules, this is a tabular form for modeling business rules. Now, business rules, you can see here, green columns are condition, pink column is an action, and you model in a tabular form how the business rules look like. We are still in the requirement gathering, right? We haven't executed anything. We have not handed over to any IT for execution. I just go quickly through that as well. So this decisions requirement diagram, it might require another decisions requirement diagram. You don't need to build the whole board in one picture. You can go nest, and this enables reusability, testability, traceability, all the ability stuff that we want. That's what it is. And then guess what? In one of those boxes of the second decisions requirement diagram, again, we have business rules or some other shape and form of the logic we want. Not all the logic of decisions is rule driven. There are calculation, computation, formulation. So in the DMN, decision model annotation, box expression is another form of the logic, allows you to build all of that computation stuff. All right. And then, of course, this, because remember we mentioned at the beginning, decisions requirement diagram gives you a holistic view of what decision, what that specific decision is, and how we go about it, including any logic that we need. Therefore, guess what? That box is your AI agent. You don't ask AI agent, what conversation should I have? You ask AI agent, here is the possible conversation I'm gonna have. Based on this information, tell me which one yields to the better outcome, rather than sky is the limit, do whatever you want, and it does whatever it wants. And guess what? We can have the data operation and computation, all of that, in this specific decisions requirement diagram. And now, because we modeled all of that, you actually throw that to a machine or whatever it is, that it executes it for you. It's not just requirement. It is a live specification of that decision. Do it make sense? So, in the catalogs you have on the table, we explains a little bit of this, but we also provide more materials and content in our book. If you want to learn more, please join us there, right? Okay, now, customer journey, right? Let's see how we can improve this customer journey. So rather than now AI agenting send us some random information based on where the touch points are, we have now a specific decision that tells what should be sent to a client in this specific touch point. This model, I didn't explain it this model. In the middle, it's the continuous decision model, which allows you to, similarly that you model business decision, you can model the continuum of decision. Now, in each of those touch points, those octagon shapes you see, we execute a specific decision model that we build. You see down the screen, that looks familiar, the decision model we built. That does create a result which is deterministic. Not every time in this context, it gives you the same result. And therefore, you can make sure when you go to your email, you receive the email actually, because more often than not, how many of us talked to someone and waited for email and didn't come through? Because that decision cycle, observe, orient, decide, act was eliminated. Now, because we implement the full cycle, therefore as act, the system kicks off a process which sends us an email. All right. Now, if you look at, quick wrap up, if you look at the old school CX, the way it is done, CX, again, I pick it for just an example of the outcome we want to improve. Old school is do the process, collect data, hope for best it becomes some actions, improve touch points. Let's see how it goes, and we know how it went because the stats that we are seeing. And the other side of it is, if you do decision-centric CX, that means you manage the continuum of decisions, so we manage the influences of decisions on each other. We use the intent signal because when you are in that touch point, now we have a decision that identifies what the intent of that conversation is. So we know exactly what should be done in the act section. And if we go back to the gap slide that we had, now we can actually improve the outcome because rather than only governing the input to operations, so data governance, AI governance, process governance, they are all input to the business operations. Now we actually control and align outcome by governing the actual decision itself. This is really a shift in any organization. So this is a shift from not knowing what decision is to governing decision. This is a shift from unpredictable outcome to predictable outcome. This is a shift from hidden, implicit decisions being byproduct of stuff to explicitly model, manage, and govern them. It takes time, and we collectively, as the owner of the decision, business analyst, in the speaking note we heard about the stewards. It is actually a decision role in the decision space. It's called decision stewards. So we can become the decision stewards with more responsibility to make sure we can implement decision-centric approach in our organizations, because 95% of the time, that's what it drives the outcome. And that's end of my talk today.